Now, continuing in the pre-tribulation rapture information, in Luke chapter 21, verse 36, Jesus was talking about the tribulation period when he said, "Pray always that may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass." It is unreasonable to believe Jesus would tell the church to pray for something he is not willing to give them. Uh, Isaiah wrote that God said, "Thy dead men shall live, together with thy dead body shall they rise. Uh, Awake and sing, ye that dwell in the dust, for thy dew is as the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead. Come, my people, enter thou into the chambers, and shut the door about thee. Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment, until the indignation be overpast. For behold, the Lord cometh out of his place to punish the inhabitants of earth for their iniquity. And the earth also shall disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain." And that's found in Isaiah chapter 26, verses 19 through 21. And notice that the dead rise first, and that's the rapture. And then next, God's people are summoned to enter into his chambers. And then we look at Malachi chapter 3, verses 17 through 18. Malachi wrote and that God said, "They shall be mine, saith the Lord of hosts, in that day when I make up my jewels, and I will spare them, as a man spareth his own son that serveth him. Then shall you return and discern between righteousness and the wicked, between him that serveth God and him that serveth him not." So pre-tribulation teachers believe God is saying he will come for his church. That's at the rapture, being caught up. And then he will return with his church. First he comes for his church in the rapture, and then he will come with his church at the second coming of Christ. And that's to judge the righteous and the wicked. In the rapture, Jesus comes for his church, and we find that in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 16 through 17, and also John chapter 14, verse 3. And when he comes at the end of the tribulation period, he will come with his church. That's in 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 13, and Revelation chapter 19, verse 14. In Matthew chapter 24, verse 36, concerning the second coming of Jesus, said, "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only." But if the church goes through the tribulation period, some will know the day because it will be 7 years from the signing of the 7-year covenant. Some will know the day because it will be 1,260 days from the day the Antichrist defiles the temple. And that's in Revelation chapter 12, verse 6. So many scholars believe that the Bible teaches that the Antichrist won't be revealed until after the church is gone. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 6 through 8. But if the church goes through the tribulation period, some will know who he is because he will sign the 7-year covenant. And you see that in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. And he will head up the world government. And that's in Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 through 10. And he will try to force multitudes to worship him and to receive his mark, receive his name or his number. And that's in Revelation 13, verses 15 through 17. Many of those who are here and being forced to worship him and take his name or die will know who he is. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 6 through 8, we see that the Antichrist is not supposed to be revealed until after the church is gone. But if the church goes through the tribulation, the church will know who the Antichrist is because he will put an idol of himself in the rebuilt temple. And you see that in Ezekiel chapter 8, Daniel 11, verse 31, and Daniel chapter 12, verse 11, Matthew 24, verse 15. If the church goes through the tribulation period, the church will know who the Antichrist is, because he will head up the world government and receive a deadly wound to his head that will be healed. Revelation chapter 13, verse 3. Some think he will be raised from the dead, or at least fake the resurrection. If the church goes through the tribulation period, the church will know who the Antichrist is, because he will head up the world government and be supported by the head of the world's religion, called the false prophet. Excuse me. And that's in Revelation chapter 13, verses 11 through 18. If the church goes through the tribulation period, the church will know who the Antichrist is, because he's the one that will kill the two witnesses. And you'll find that in Revelation chapter 11, verse 7. So many people don't think the church will go through the tribulation period because of verses of scripture that say things like, the Lord preserveth them, all of them that love him, but all the wicked he will destroy. And that's in Psalms 145, verses 18 through 20. Many believe God will preserve the church from the tribulation period, or keep the church out of the tribulation period, and does not destroy the church in the tribulation period. There are verses of scripture that says things like, you shall not add unto the word which I commanded you, neither shall ye diminish aught from it. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 2, Proverbs chapter 30, verses 5 through 6, and Revelation chapter 22, verses 18 through 19. Some believe people must throw away verses of scripture to believe that the church will go through the tribulation period. In the 7 letters to the 7 churches, Jesus said, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. And he said that 7 times. Revelations chapter 2, verses 7 and 11, 17, 29, chapter 3, verse 6, and 13 and 22. When we get to the tribulation period, Jesus said, if any man hath an ear, let him hear. Revelation chapter 13, verse 9. He left out what the Spirit saith unto the churches, because there are no churches on earth to go through the tribulation period. The church will be in heaven at that time. And when the rapture happens, the church goes up to meet Jesus in the air. And that the rapture, or the catching up of the church, is in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 18. But at the end of the tribulation period, the church will come down to the earth with Jesus to witness what he does at the Battle of Armageddon. And that's in Revelation chapter 19, verses 14 through 21. Pre-tribulation rapture is more consistent with God's grace, love, and mercy, and compassion, and so on. The mid and post tribulation is more consistent with God's wrath. If the rapture takes place at the end of the tribulation period, and all the wicked are removed from the earth at that time, Matthew chapter 13, verse 24 and 30, and 47 through 50, chapter 25, verse 41. So if everybody's removed from the earth at that time, no one will be left to repopulate the earth during the millennial reign of Christ. If all of the saved are raptured and all the lost are removed from the earth at the end of the tribulation, no one will be left to repopulate the earth. The Antichrist will prevail against the saints during the tribulation period, but the gates of hell won't prevail against the church. And you'll find that information in Revelation chapter 13, verse 7, and Matthew chapter 16, verse 18. Therefore, the church won't go through the tribulation period. The 24 elders, are representatives of the church, will be in heaven before the 7th seal scroll is broken. And that's in Revelation chapter 4, verse 4, and chapter 6, verses 1 through 17. Jesus was talking about the tribulation period when he said, pray always that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, And he said that in Luke chapter 21, verse 36. He didn't say, pray always that you may be accounted worthy to endure some or all of these things that shall come to pass. Thank you for listening.